This is a megalodon. It was the biggest shark that ever lived. It could grow up to 20 meters long and weigh over 60 tons. That's longer than a Tyrannosaurus rex and heavier than a blue whale. And yet it lived 23 million years ago. It's not alone. I'm going to take you on a journey back in time to explore the prehistoric seas. We were going to swim with enormous creatures that are unknown to most people and learn about an incredible world that existed before humans ever walked the earth. The fossil record shows that life in the oceans was incredibly diverse in the Lacustrine period. This was a time when mammals were just starting to diversify, and dinosaurs still roamed the land. But there were also all kinds of other bizarre animals living in the sea. These animals are not from another planet. They reef from our own planet, and they existed for millions of years until suddenly they disappeared from the fossil record. The oldest known fossils of these animals are from the Silurian period. That's when the first jawed fish appeared. And they were huge, growing up to 9 meters long. These fish were like sharks, but they weren't sharks. They were something else. But over time, these giant fish became smaller and more like sharks. And by the end of the Silurian period, they had evolved into modern sharks. That's why you never see any fossils of these creatures from the Devonian period. It's because they all died out. This is a terrible tragedy, but it's important to remember that death is part of life. It's the only way for new life to evolve. Without the death of the old, there can be no birth of the new. So even though it's sad to think about all those creatures dying, it's also exciting to think about all the amazing creatures that evolved as a result. But this is not the only reason why there are no fossils of these creatures from the Devon period. There's another reason as well. It's because there was a mass extinction at the end of the Silurian period. And that mass extinction killed off not only these creatures, but also many others. It's hard to say exactly what caused this mass extinction, but it probably had something to do with changes in sea level or climate. In any case, it wiped out about 85% of all species on Earth. It's one of the 5 biggest mass extinctions we've ever had. So what does this mean for our quest to find fossils of these creatures? Well, it means that if we want to find any, we'll have to go back further in time. Here we are at the bottom of the ocean. Around us are strange and wonderful creatures that are unlike anything we see today. A creature with a beak like a parrot, feathers like a bird, but also the body of a fish. Can you imagine such a thing? Yet they existed. This is a Mosasaurus. It looks like a crocodile, but it's actually more closely related to a whale. It's one of the few animals that lived in both freshwater and saltwater, and it was a fierce predator. Mosasaurus had a long, narrow snout with about 40 teeth. It also had paddle-shaped feet and a long, powerful tail. This made it a great swimmer, but it also meant that it couldn't walk very well on land. And here's a Plesiosaur. It looks like a dinosaur, but it's actually more closely related to a turtle. It had a long neck, small head, and 4 paddle-like limbs. The neck could reach up to 9 meters in length, but the rest of the body was much smaller. The thing that really makes plesiosaurs stand out, though, is their head. It was tiny compared to the rest of their body, and it had huge eyes and sharp teeth. This is because they were ambush predators. They would hide at the bottom of the ocean and then strike fast when their prey got too close. But not all the creatures in the prehistoric seas were big. Some were tiny, like this one. It's a trilobite, and it's one of the most common fossils we find. That S because they lived in huge numbers, and they had hard shells that protected them from being eaten. Trilobites were everywhere. They lived in all the world's oceans, and they came in all shapes and sizes. They also lived for a very long time. They first appeared 500 million years ago, and they continued to thrive until the last mass extinction 250 million years ago. Then there are the Ammonites. These are some of my favorites because they look so strange. They kind of look like snails, but they're actually more closely related to squid and octopus. They had a spiral shell that they could retract into if they felt threatened. Ammonites were also very diverse. There were hundreds of different types of them, and they came in all shapes and sizes. Some were small and slow-moving. Others were huge and fast-moving. Finally, we come to the Ichthyosaurs. These are some of the strangest creatures in the prehistoric seas because they look like dolphins. But they're actually more closely related to dinosaurs. Ichthyosaurs had a long, narrow body and a pair of huge eyes. They were also very diverse. There were all kinds of them, big and small, fast and slow, with different shaped snouts and different numbers of teeth. We have found lots of fossils of these creatures. It's because they lived near the surface of the water where there was lots of oxygen, but deep down below, it's a different story. Deep in the ocean, there's almost no oxygen, so only creatures that can survive without it live down there. This includes jellyfish, worms, and sponges. But it also includes something else, something that looks like a shark but isn't a shark, a creature called a hexanchist. Hexanchists were some of the first sharks to ever exist. They're more primitive than modern sharks, and they're also more dangerous. That's because they have 6 gills instead of 5. This means they don't need to open their mouths to breathe, so they can keep their eyes on the lookout for prey while they're swimming. Hexanchists also have 6 or 7 pairs of fins, which makes them good swimmers. They're also very diverse. There are all kinds of them, big and small, fast and slow, with different shaped snouts and different numbers of teeth. The same is true of another creature called a nautiloid. Nautiloids are more primitive than ammonites, and they also have a shell, but it's straight instead of spiral. Nautiloids are also very diverse. There are all kinds of them, big and small, fast and slow, with different numbers of chambers in their shells. Finally, we come to the deepest part of the ocean. Down here, it's pitch black, and there's no oxygen. Only creatures that can survive in these conditions live down here, and one of those creatures is a starfish. Starfish may seem out of place in the prehistoric seas. After all, they're not fish. But they're actually more closely related to sea urchins and sand dollars. Starfish have been around since the Cambrian explosion. That's when most of the major animal groups first appeared on Earth. Starfish have been around for a very long time. They lived through the mass extinction at the end of the Permian period, and they continue to live today. So what does this all mean? What can we learn from these strange and wonderful creatures that once inhabited the prehistoric seas? Well, first of all, it shows us that life on Earth has always been diverse. There have always been all kinds of strange and wonderful creatures living in our oceans. It also shows us that life on Earth has always been fragile. Many of these creatures are now extinct, and that's a reminder that we shouldn't take our planet for granted. We should protect it and preserve it for future generations. Finally, it shows us that life on Earth is always changing. New creatures are constantly evolving, and that's what makes our planet so special. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.